The topic for today's presentation is my all-time favorite, web services. The objective is to introduce you to the various building blocks of web services, to talk about the SOAP engine, what a SOAP engine is and what it does, the various pros and cons of web services, and also I'll briefly introduce you to the various frameworks, web service frameworks in Java and .NET. Since you are watching this video, you must be already familiar with how the web works. We have a service provider and a service consumer, which in our case are YouTube, and the service provider is YouTube and the service consumer is you or your browser. And they work using HTTP and HTML. Taking it to the next level, web services work using HTTP and XML. And in most cases, a web service provider and a consumer both are software applications talking to each other. And the XML message you send, or the elements within the XML message that you send over HTTP in case of web services, is defined by the SOAP standard. SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, and this is exactly how a SOAP message will look. This is just a skeleton. The entire message is packed within a SOAP envelope. It has a header block and a body block. So the actual message goes in the body block, and the header usually carries metadata. Say for example, your application can authenticate any web service request using the username and password sent in within the header block. A WSDL file, which stands for Web Services Description Language, is a contract between a web service provider and a consumer. It's an XML file again, and by looking at a WSDL file, a web service client knows what data he should be sending in to get the appropriate response back, or to get appropriate service, to consume appropriate service. Usually you will not be handwriting or coding WSDL files. You will be generating them using the various tools provided, but it is still important for you to understand the various sections of a WSDL file, because the SOAP message that gets generated depends on how you define your WSDL file. And this will be, I'll be presenting this, the details of the various sections of a WSDL file in a future presentation. The SOAP engine. The SOAP engine actually does the serialization and deserialization of XML data. All that means is it converts your Java or .NET or any other language objects into XML and writes it over HTTP or the network, and the other way around. So a SOAP engine actually is present both on the client side where the request is sent out, and also on the server side or the service provider side. And a SOAP engine also dispatches the requests appropriately. So the incoming requests have to be sent to the appropriate service or implementation methods in our application, and SOAP engine also does that. So it deserializes and serializes data and also dispatches the incoming requests to the appropriate service. There are several advantages of web services, but to name a few, web services, as I said, work using HTTP and XML. So HTTP is transport independent and XML is data independent. It has metadata. You have already seen in my previous presentations how powerful XML can be. So the combination of these two makes web services really powerful. All a language or any legacy language needs is support of XML and HTTP, and you can expose your existing components or code as web services, which then can be easily consumed by any other application. Web services also bring your application or take your application much more closer to your customer by allowing them to customize or extend your application using the web services you expose. And since web services work on HTTP, another advantage is since HTTP uses port 80, web services can be easily accessed by other applications. With great power also comes some limitations. Since most of the web services standards like SOAP and a few other standards which I will be talking in a future presentation are managed by open bodies like W3C and OASIS. So with open standards also comes the problem of establishing them, but for the last few years they have been doing a great job with around that area. And the serialization and deserialization of XML data back and forth into Java or .NET objects and the other way around can or usually add some performance overload on your application. But the advantages, as I said, by far outweigh the disadvantages of web services. Talking about the frameworks that are available out there, in Java, JAX-WS is the standard for web services. JAX-WS stands for Java API for XML-based web services, and it pretty much says what are all the interfaces that a particular SOAP engine or web services stack should implement. For example, we have Apache CXF and Spring WS, Spring Web Services, which implement the JAX-WS standard. And almost all the application servers like WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, all of these servers come with their own implementation of web services stack, which does exactly what I previously said. Dispatch the incoming request to the appropriate service, deserialize and serialize XML messages. So they all do the same thing. And on the other side of the wall, moving to the .NET side, web services pretty much can be both consumed and provided by using the Windows Communication Foundation and WCF. It's from Visual Studio, it's very easy to write a web service provider. It's just like annotating your code. With a few annotations, you can easily expose any class or any method within your application as web service, and also you can easily generate a client and consume a web service fairly easily. So to summarize, today we have seen what are all the building blocks of web services, namely HTTP, XML, and the SOAP standard, and what a WSDL file is, which stands for Web Services Description Language, and it's a contract between a web service consumer and a web service provider. What a web service engine is and how it serializes or what it does, it serializes and deserializes data or XML. We also discussed the various advantages and disadvantages of web services, and we have seen how the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. And the JAX-WS standard, which is the web services standard in Java language. In the future, I'll be presenting the various WS standards, the various sections of a WSDL file, and also a hands-on example. Until then, keep sharing and learning. Thanks for watching.